or deal with some of the matters of conditions which can simplify those things rather than leaving them to a phasing plan where different officers over maybe the next 10 years will be asked to consider things. What do you think of these bricks? Is this sort of cladding okay? So I'm just asking for that bit more information. Having said that, I'm happy with what I feel is the general balance that we go forward towards approving this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. Just dealing with those matters in turn. First of all, the file cost retail study. That is a decision. Sorry, a decision has been made by the portfolio holder to accept the findings of that study. And as Mr. Addison said, and as it says in the committee report, that set a local threshold of 750 square metres. Two things about that. First of all, that study has not yet been tested in terms of the local planning inquiry. So, a bit like the preferred option document, it's at this stage it's got limited weight that can be applied to it. It's also obviously a piece of work that was completed relatively late in the consideration of this application. Now, whilst I accept that policy should be taken on the basis of as it is on the day that the decision is made, I think there's an issue there that this evidence base is rather than policy has been brought forward late on. Notwithstanding that, an impact assessment has been carried out. So although it's not required, one has been done. There is an impact, potential impact on Kirkham in particular, but the conclusion is that impact is acceptable. I think one of the issues there, of course, is that a number of people have said that actually Kirkham has done remarkably well during the recent economic downturn and has survived well. I think that sort of is a tribute to the strength of the town centre. In terms of guaranteeing the delivery of the stadium, on page 89, the requirements of the Section 106 agreement are set out. First two bullet points there. The first one is seeking to secure the delivery of the football stadium, and the second one, the delivery of the sports pitches together with the community use and the pricing policy for their use. So that's going a bit farther, I suppose, than the Vice Chairman mentioned, but it's the details aren't there, obviously. That would be the subject of discussion because, again, as the Vice Chairman said, how you actually phase a development of this nature, where you've got enabling development, is how can the development that is going to enable come forward if it comes forward first. So it is a tricky one to deal with, but one that I consider that the details can be worked out with. What we clearly need to ensure there is that we're not left with all the enabling development and none of the development of which it is proposed to enable. That's clearly the aim of that element there. The condition number 11 was something I think that Councillor Speak sort of referred to earlier in terms of other uses on the site, and that's what that is intended to do. The permitted development rights to which the Vice Chairman refers actually only apply to land which is not associated with the curtilage of a building. So for the vast majority, because these are car parks associated with the stadium, etc., they would be part of that curtilage. The 28 days normally applies to things like Farmers Field or something like that. So we feel that the condition as it stands is sufficient control. The the fast food element and those elements being sacrificed instead of the indoor, the sports development facilities. I think that probably comes down to a decision made by the applicant that the other elements of development are there as enabling development, and if those go, what are you enabling? So it's that balance, and that decision was taken clearly by the applicant. I can say no more than that, I think, on that matter. The restoration of the existing site, this is something that we've considered long and hard. Ordinarily, you will be able to impose a condition or come to some form of agreement with the developer if they were moving on to a different site, if you felt that their existing site should be returned to a particular condition before that development goes ahead. The difficulty here is that the land ownership is separate to the applicant here. So we can't impose a condition because we're not imposing it on that landowner's land. They only lease the site at Kellamar Park. Likewise, with a Section 106 agreement, we would have to get the current landowner to be a party to that agreement, and again that might cause difficulties. We have, however, seen sites of the lease which requires the site to be returned to its to agriculture once they cease using the site. Excuse me. Sorry, excuse me. So once they finish using the site, the terms of the lease deal with that matter. That is not the ideal planning situation, I have to admit, but it's something that gives us adequate comfort. The concluding element on that with thought is that if another football club, hockey club, rugby club, whatever it might be, probably not hockey these days because you probably need an artificial pitch, but some other sports facility was to want to take on that site, I would have to say that the actual site itself would be an appropriate site for another type of club to take on. And then yes, so in terms of the 106, I think it does actually address the majority of the issues that the Vice Chairman raised.
I've got Councillor Clayton followed by Councillor Collins, and I think a very quick comment from Councillor Arnold before we go to the vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'd like to start by saying that the current successes of the football club are to be congratulated. So I believe that we are obliged to look at this application based purely on planning criteria and not on the euphoria of the recent successes of the football team. This application can only be described as immense, which will inevitably have a significant impact on Westham and the surrounding area. We need to separate the planning issues of this massive complex from the emotive aspirations of AFC Fylde. Whilst this is a hybrid planning application, I believe the outline element must be taken into consideration with the full application. The officer's conclusions at page 88 of the report provide both positive and negative key impacts, leading to some 49 when I wrote this paper, but now 57 conditions being applied. I judge that the identified negative points outweigh the positive points, and the actual need for as many as 57 conditions is indicative that this application is flawed. As mentioned by our Vice Chairman, also I have particular concern for conditions 11 and 36, containing non-sporting activities, such as car boot sales and pop concerts. Whilst we've heard from Mark Evans that there are conditions that can be applied, but despite that, if granted, the effect on the immediate locality would be severe. As a local person, we've all, I and many other people, have had many experiences of car boot sales at the junction of the M55 that have generated long tailbacks of over 2 miles on the A585. Back in September last year, I expressed concern about the overall size and scale of the scheme, but took into account the inclusion of what was described as a sports science centre to provide facilities, especially for young people. We are now considering this revised application with this part of the plan being removed and replaced with 492 car parking spaces, quite a different scheme. We heard from Tom Houghton from the AFC Community Foundation, who talked about delivering facilities for schools. And I think I should remind people that whatever decision is made today, that those ambitions of the Community Foundation to deliver such facilities can still continue. Whilst the identification of this piece of land coincides with the designation of Site E4 in the draft preferred option document, the portfolio holder has been quoted, and I quote, "It must be made clear to any developer that this is not a green light for approval." Even if the area defined as E4 in the draft preferred option document is finally adopted, it was only ever envisaged that 4 hectares will be designated as employment land and not 12.6 hectares as per this application. Therefore, until the preferred option document is finalised, this area is currently designated as countryside and outside the settlement boundary. As such, it is contrary to SP policy SP2. Within the application document, there are common threads of concerns already raised by town and parish councils, together with some 82 letters of objection compared with 32 letters of support. Most of the following we've already heard from the speakers, however I'll quickly summarise. 1. The site is outside the settlement boundary and contrary to SP2. There will be a loss of agricultural land. There will be an impact on Kirkham and Westham High Streets. It is questionable for the need for 6,000 seats when we've heard that the average attendance is 400. The visual impact of both the stadium and the warehouse in excess of 60 feet with light pollution from the ancillary floodlit pictures. And the actual need for a petrol station is questionable when there is one already less than 1 mile away. And one of the most important concerns that's been expressed on many occasions being the traffic impact. Turning specifically to traffic, LCC Highways refer to the current queuing and the delay on the A585 northbound, on many occasions backed up from the M55 to the proposed access, and often even further back towards Wheaton Road. Therefore, it is inevitable that increased vehicle movements from the proposed site will further increase congestion and could also put the 2 emergency services located at Fleetwood Road at risk when trying to gain access to the M55. The very nature of the proposal would be a magnet for young people who would wish to enter the site at all times of the day and night. This would require the crossing of the A585, a potentially hazardous means of access. The condition of providing the 2 token crossings would help to reduce the risk, but it will have the disadvantage of creating even further traffic congestion on an already extremely busy A-class road. LCC state in the report that Cameron Rose Associates, and I quote, have little understanding of the local network being accessed. Even with modified modelling, LCC still have areas they do not agree with. For example, the provision of a petrol station, which LCC state that this is likely to have a much greater impact than that presented by Cameron Rose Associates. Turning again to the report at page 74, there are just 8 supporting comments, including greater retail provision stroke choice in the form of an Aldi store. It is clear that the viability and cross-funding of the stadium is totally dependent upon the inclusion of the proposed store. However, if the employment designation area E4 is finally accepted in the draft local plan, policy SH13 states that the new retail development would not be acceptable on land that is identified for employment unless it is demonstrated that no other location is available. I question the identified sites in the retail assessment study being Kirkham Community Centre car park, the land to the south of Barnfield as the only possible sites, with other sites dismissed as unavailable. It is questionable that this is a very convenient finding to satisfy the policy. We've already heard from colleagues that there are other sites, the Swan Pub was mentioned, and the Kirkgate Centre has never even been explored. If, however, the store does remain on site, in addition, policy SH14 sets out further criteria, including that the location is served by a satisfactory existing level of public transport. I question that. The local road network is able to accommodate predicted traffic levels. I question that. That the development can be demonstrated to have no adverse effect on overall travel patterns and would not lead to increased dependence on the use of the motor car. I do not consider that any of the above can satisfactorily be achieved, and in particular, the proposal clearly indicates the high dependence on the use of the motor car, 492 car parking spaces. At the time of writing this report, there were still outstanding issues with the Environment Agency and the Lancashire County Ecology Services, and we've heard this morning that there are some late observations. But the Lancashire County Ecology Services are clearly still not satisfied with the response from Cameron Brook, and they are still awaiting satisfactory results on the methods of surveys for amphibians, common toads, bats, birds and badgers. In conclusion, as mentioned earlier, the officer's conclusions indicate, and I quote, "There are conflicting outcomes with some positive aspects of the development and some negative aspects. My view is that the negative aspects significantly outweigh the positive aspects. By approving this application, the impact on the wider community would be detrimental to the viability of the existing settlements of Kirkham and Wesson for all the above reasons. Therefore, I will not be supporting the recommendation." Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Collins now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We heard the Vice Chairman speak a little earlier, and he seems to be moving towards approval of this application. Well, I only see sort of like 6 people who've spoken, 3 broadly in favour of it and 3 broadly against it, so I don't know where he gets that from. There's 2 issues here. There's the football ground, there's the supermarket. When we discussed the application in Ray Green, I said it was in the wrong place. And I can't think of anywhere really better for the football ground than what's proposed. But I'd like to be supporting it, but be happy in supporting it. I would have liked to have seen an ecology report. I would like to have had a site visit. I would have liked to have the retail impact assessment done. We're talking here about a major site on the edge of Kirkham. It's only fairly recently we had a site visit when they were converting the old Kirkham police station. If that's important enough for a site visit to defer an application, then surely I can't believe that members of this committee can't defer such an important decision for just 1 month to enable a site visit. We drove past the site on Monday when we did this little tour of the borough. It wasn't down on the agenda to pass that site. We certainly didn't stop there long or really look at the site in any detail. A few things we mentioned. I don't want to repeat what's been said earlier. One thing I'd like to say, if it's an emerging policy, the threshold that we do retail impact study, and yes, this land is in the emerging local plan as well. So if they both apply, you know, if you say, well, hang on, this is, you know, we've entered this land for employment and leisure, but we haven't decided that yet. Surely if you've got a policy, they both equally apply. I don't think I've got any more to say, and I think everybody's heard enough today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, are we okay? Right. I'm moving to the vote now. First, on page 3 of the late observation sheet, the recommendation, which is on page 89 of your document, has been removed, those top 3 pages, to top 3 lines, to state, following the response, so if you've got your document in front of you, it says recommendation following the responses received from the Environment Agency and Lancashire County Council of Ecology, it is proposed the recommendation be changed to read that powers to determine the application are delegated to the Head of Planning and Regeneration, subject to resolving the outstanding issues relating to ecological matters and subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement. The recommendations in your agenda are also increased to the 57, which is on page 5.
The bullet points and those issues, I take it, are still there. You haven't read those out.
So the terms of the Section 106 agreement will be to secure the delivery of the football stadium, the delivery of the sports pitches together with the community use and the pricing policy for their use, an appropriate financial contribution towards securing public realmworks in the vicinity of the site, financial contribution towards the improvement of public transport and or sustainable transport initiatives, including travel planning in the vicinity of the site. Just for clarification, sustainable transport also includes improvements to access to the station. That would be included in that. In terms of the conditions, they're obviously all set down there. If in delegating authority to myself to deal with these matters, obviously if there was a need to change any of the wording in those conditions in a minor way to take account of that ongoing discussion, that would include that element.
Sorry, Councillor.
Can I just ask, condition 42, everything else looks like defined altogether, and then you've got bicycles and motor parks. Can we not have them built? They're not right.
It's a typical open-ended statement.
I suppose, Chairman, it's a type of goods that you sort of, as Councillor Army says, it's, you know, a Halfords, which we generally find at an entertainment store.
Can you remember it's only a very small store? It's not a big B&Q type store.
Chairman, I think that's something, whilst I can't sort of say what the outcome of the conclusion of any discussions might be, I think that's something that we can certainly discuss further with the applicant, especially as it's an outline element of the application.
Yes. See where you're coming from, Councillor Sweet, because we all think it's a really good store in Kirk. And it will be coming to us. It will be coming to us, it's only outline planning permission. Okay. I'm moving to the vote now, members. Do you want a recorded vote? If you don't want a recorded vote, it's a show of hands. Okay. All those in favour of the application, please show. Against? Abstain? That has been carried. We're dealing with application number 3. I understand there are 2 speakers. I'm afraid 5-minute break, please.
Well, let's get the pack to roll, let's get it done.